Hey class, so we are halfway through the unit. We are at 4.5, what causes conflict over boundaries. So let's take a look at what College Board would like for you to know. All of this is pretty straightforward. Some of this has to do more with knowing definitions. So you need to be able to explain the nature and function of international and internal boundaries. So boundaries are defined, delimited, demarcated, and administered to establish limits of sovereignty, but are often contested. So we will talk about a few of those issues that occur from time to time between places. Political boundaries often coincide with cultural, national, or economic divisions. However, some boundaries are created by demilitarized zones or policies, such as the Berlin Conference. We'll look at a couple of those examples. Also, land and maritime boundaries are boundaries within the sea or ocean. And international agreements can influence national or regional identity and encourage or discourage international or internal interactions and disputes over resources. And finally, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea defines the rights and responsibilities of nations in the use of international waters, established territorial seas, and exclusive economic zones. So you will see a little chart on how that is decided. So first, overall, some of the main things that you'll need to know about boundaries is that they're defined, delimited, demarcated, and administered. So we will go through the definitions of exactly what each one of those means here in a moment. This includes land and also in water. We will also briefly mention airspace as well. An expression of political power and territoriality, which means and kind of relates to establishing sovereignty or the ability to govern oneself. Boundaries are definitely subject to change and conflict, and we will hear a lot of examples of those. I'm sure you all can think of some of your own as well. And they sometimes, but definitely not always, correspond with cultural or economic divisions. So in terms of identifying boundaries, these are the terms that you all definitely need to know for this objective. So defined, countries legally define and agree to where borders are located through an agreement or a treaty. So that is kind of officializing what that border is. Delimited is identifying the location of the defined boundaries on a map, usually at the same time that the boundaries are defined and done through a legal designation. So both of these go hand in hand. Countries will officially decide what these borders are, and delimited means that they are actually putting that officially on a map. Demarcated, this is a visible marking of the landscape with objects such as fences or signs. So if you see signs that say, "Welcome to Switzerland," or Canton Zug, that's demarcated. It's that visible marking. Administered, this is the legal management of the border through laws, immigration regulation, documentation, and persecution. So just the enforcement of that particular border. Now moving on to the sea and ocean. So maritime boundaries and why do they matter? These are actually really important. Trade and shipping routes are very much influenced by these boundaries. Fishing rights, oil reserves, defense. So in terms of where militaries are allowed to patrol with their ships or submarines. Landlocked countries are at a significant disadvantage because they do not have that direct access to the sea or ocean. These are also highly disputed, just like land boundaries. So we'll look at a couple of those examples. So the UN Convention of Law of the Seas in 1982 set these zones as to help determine these maritime boundaries. So this first one, this is territorial sea. This is 12 nautical miles from the coastline. So moving from the coastline out into the water. That means that that country has complete sovereignty over that water and airspace. So everything that you kind of see here in this image, they have complete control over that area. Permission of innocent passage of foreign ships needs to be allowed. Then we have this other zone. So this is the exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. So this is 200 nautical miles. So this definitely extends outward into the water. A state has special rights over the exploration and use of marine resources, such as fishing, whaling, as well as natural resources like natural gas, oil, and energy. So that's really significant, right? Countries definitely want to have that control and that sovereignty over those resources in that area. So in terms of 200 nautical miles from that coast, that is where that particular country will have that right. So there are many situations where there are less than 400 nautical miles between countries. So this map that we see here, lots of overlap, right? Lots of contested water. This area of the South China Sea, especially in the last, I would say 10, 12 years, has been seeing a lot of encroachment from China. But overall, these are definitely disputed waters. So there is one policy called the median line principle, and that is drawing a boundary that is midway between two or more states' coasts. So this is kind of like literally meeting in the middle, where they have permission to have their sovereignty up to a point, and then they have a shared zone. But even then, that can be kind of tricky, especially maybe between countries that don't have the best of relationships. That can definitely get complicated. So again, these are the things you need to keep in mind. Make sure you know those definitions and head over to